But those that are invested, of course, we have the Korean so-called ants or the retail investors. I think they will continue pumping money into the market, at least for the time being.
We're also keeping an eye on South Korea's tech sector. The country is set to unveil what it calls 3 mega projects later today, with President Lee Jae-myung speaking along with executives from Samsung and SK Group. Reports say they could announce AI and chip investments worth up to $1.3 trillion over the next decade. For more, let's bring in our Seoul Bureau editor, Danny Thomas. Danny, is this about reshaping Korea's long-term competitive advantage in the semiconductor space?
Yes, that's right. It's been what President Lee Jae-myung has been trying to achieve to set Korea on the path of further cementing its position in the semiconductor world. And we'll come to know the details of that in about 2 hours or so. And there's been a steady stream of media leaks that kind of talks about various numbers. Last week we heard a number of 1,000 trillion, and that's doubled today to 2,000 trillion, which is about 1.3 trillion over the next decade. And mind you, I mean, if you just put that in the context, the South Korean economy, the GDP itself is about 1.8 trillion as of 2024. So this is big numbers. These are big pledges. How it gets executed, and these are the big question marks that the market has to kind of deal with.
Well, it is a huge number. How will that compare in terms of competitiveness when, you take a look at rivals, the likes of the U.S., Taiwan? Where does Korea stand on the back of this investment?
This should definitely be among the biggest of a single company or 2 company investment that's been announced as a pledge. We had similar, TSMC was the biggest number previously. We had the CHIPS Act, which kind of committed some numbers. But in terms of a 10-year promise, this will stand out as the biggest, is our kind of estimate. We'll come to know more details as we wait for the numbers to come out. But definitely one of the biggest pledges by any country to kind of cement its position.
Danny, thank you. Bloomberg Seoul Bureau Editor Danny Thomas there. Let's discuss the implications of South Korea's industrial push and how this potential capital surge could impact investor sentiment. Kaya Pav is a market strategist at First Degree Global Asset Management. Kaya, good to have you with us. $1.3 trillion. Does it justify you buying Korea even more?
Thank you so much for having me on the program. It's a pleasure to join you. Wow, what a big announcement coming out of Korea. I see this partially bullish and partially bearish. Bullish from the perspective that this really shows that the demand for memory chips is structural, because these 2 market leaders in Korea are willing to put $1.3 trillion. And as Danny just pointed out, Korean GDP is 1.8, 1.9 trillion. But on the flip side, I would also see this as a bearish signal, because these record capex spending coming on the back of record demand often end up in a glut. So we could see the price of DRAM and NAND collapsing maybe 2-3 years down the road, especially given how the semis and the sort of tech industry is going globally.
For now, though, it sounds justified because of the expected demand. But what ROI, what threshold justifies an investment of $1.3 trillion? No doubt it's over 10 years.
I agree. The ROI definitely is difficult to measure and quantify. And if we look, for instance, some of the neo cloud providers in the US, their ROI is actually not that high. So they are in the range of maybe 7 to 10%. But I would also keep in mind that even though we have a lot of investment in Korea into the fabs, the supply chain doesn't start there. The supply chain actually starts at ASML. It starts with Lam Research, Applied Materials that provide the equipment that's going to be used in the fabs. And the capacity to produce more equipment and machinery can't just be amped up as fast.
So you're saying there are bottlenecks?
There are bottlenecks. There are bottlenecks. And I think their growth capacity is about 30-35% based on the market estimate. So the supply is not going to be available immediately.
So even though they have plans to spend $1.3 trillion, it may not materialize because the infrastructure and the bottlenecks are there.
Correct.
How do you play this then?
I mean, depends whether you have to allocate into Korea, whether you have to allocate to AI and technology as a whole. I think a lot of the large investors are reconsidering their AI thesis, and I think some of the smart money is already taking some of their allocation off the market. Multiple reasons for that. We can talk about the valuations, we can talk about the political sentiment, we can just talk about the concentration of the market. But those that are invested, of course, we have the Korean so-called ants or the retail investors. I think they will continue pumping money into the market, at least for the time being.
So they will continue until they see signs that it is time to stop. I mean, if you take a look at where the Kospi is right now, despite the sell-off, which we saw recently, it's still up 95% year to date. How much more upside? How are you looking at the risks and reward in a market like this?
From me, it's a very red hot market. Luckily, I don't
red
have
hot that you need to be in, or red hot you need to be cautious and hence take money off the table?
I would rather be cautious on this, but luckily within our organization we don't necessarily have to make these calls. So we are very lucky that we don't have to allocate, we don't have such mandates. But definitely global investors are invested in Korea, and also talking about emerging markets allocation. A lot of the managers have emerging markets mandates. EM is dominated now by Korea and by Taiwan. So it's very difficult to have that diversification from EM perspective you used to have, because it seems like every big allocation now has some sort of AI element in it.
Of course, there's still China if you want to play AI.
Yes.
Is it still looking attractive?
China is very much policy driven. So in my view, when you